The first time I encountered the human problem, it was not in the official archives, nor in the records of their wars, nor even in the treaties that followed. It was in the whispers, the quiet, uneasy tones exchanged between members of the council after the Peregrine incident. Whispers about a species that did not respect the limits that governed all others. Whispers about a species that, through stubbornness, chaos, and something far stranger, had done the impossible. Humans had broken physics. I remember standing in the observatory of Velka Prime, the chamber awash in the soft blue light of a dozen data streams. The council's delegates spoke in low tones, but their fear was unmistakable. Not fear of humanity's weapons, not their numbers, not their technology. No, that would have been simple to contain. This was something far more dangerous. Fear of the impossible becoming possible. Our laws of reality had been stable for millennia. Energy could not be summoned from nowhere. Velocity had limits. Space-time bent in predictable, mathematically perfect arcs. And then came humanity. A young, reckless species from a pale blue world on the edge of an irrelevant spiral arm. By every rational metric, they should have been a minor civilization. Contained, predictable. They were not. The first major violation of physical law, or what we believe to be immutable physical law, was recorded during the Andrus Rift campaign. According to every measurement, every instrument, every model, the human fleet should not have been able to escape. Their drives were out of fuel. Their jump windows had collapsed. The rift was closing, folding in on itself with gravitational forces beyond anything a starship could withstand. And yet, they did not die. The sensor logs show it clearly, human vessels accelerating into the collapsing event horizon. Then nothing. No debris, no transmission, no energy spike consistent with vaporization. Just gone. Days later, those same ships appeared on the other side of the rift, intact, operational, and moving faster than any FTL drive had ever allowed. The scientists of the council called it an anomaly, an error, a misreading of data. But it was not a mistake. It was the beginning of a pattern. In the following years, the incidents multiplied. A human strike team walking through a radiation field that would have shredded matter to particles, and surviving. A scout vessel enduring the gravity of a neutron star for 27 seconds longer than our physics declared possible, and emerging functional. A single drop pod falling through an atmospheric entry corridor that should have melted it into plasma, and landing intact. The explanations were always unsatisfactory. Human error, they said. Improper calibration, they said. But the whispers spread. The unspoken question hung in the air like a dark star. How does one fight a species that does not obey the same rules as the rest of reality? I studied the data myself. I replayed the Peregrine incident, the most infamous case of all. A single human frigate cornered by a Trinari siege fleet. The mathematics were clear. Their trajectory was locked, their energy depleted, their reactor overtaxed. There was no chance of escape. But then the logs show something impossible. The human vessel performed a maneuver that required negative mass. Negative mass. It should not exist. No drive system in the known galaxy could replicate it. No theoretical model could support it. And yet, the humans did it, and vanished into the dark. When the Trinari fleet tried to replicate the maneuver, they disintegrated. The equation did not work for anyone else. The rumors spread further. Some whispered that humans had unlocked some hidden layer of reality. Others believed they had made a pact with some ancient power, or discovered an aspect of the universe the rest of us could not perceive. But among the military archives, there was one recurring description in the debrief reports of alien commanders. They should not have survived, but they did. Humans always do. The galaxy is filled with species that respect the rules. We understand the speed of light. We understand the collapse thresholds of gravity wells. We understand entropy, causality, and time. Humanity looks at these things and decides they are optional. Their physicists don't just theorize, they experiment recklessly. Their pilots push engines beyond tolerance. Their soldiers walk through death expecting to return. Their explorers fly into storms no sane being would enter. And sometimes, impossibly often, they come back. We have recordings, shaky, incomplete, of human vessels blinking through locations they could not possibly traverse, of weapons firing without identifiable power sources, of human soldiers appearing on battlefields seconds before their dropships arrive. These are not fables. These are military logs, council certified. It is tempting to say that they have technology we do not understand. But I have studied their history. I have traced their development through the ruins of Earth's early archives. There was a time when they were just as bound by their own physics as any species. But even then they bent the rules. Flight before the mathematics said it was feasible. Space travel without adequate shielding. Nuclear energy when their planet was not ready. Over and over they took what should not have worked and forced it to. The Andari scholars called this phenomenon human defiance field. A term both mocking and fearful. A belief that human willpower itself warped probability. A myth, they said, a superstition born from fear. But myths do not bend neutron star trajectories. Superstitions do not let starships survive impossible accelerations. I have stood in council chambers and heard ancient empires debate whether humanity is a statistical fluke, a localized anomaly, or something more dangerous. Something that does not just live in the universe, but reshapes it around them. The Trelka theorists proposed a hypothesis. They claimed human consciousness, specifically collective determination under extreme duress, creates localized distortions in physical law. Their equations were incomplete, their experiments dangerous. 2 research stations vanished trying to replicate the effect. The council quietly classified the theory. It was too unsettling. If true, it would mean that humanity carries within it a weapon no other species possesses. The ability to break the rules themselves. When humanity enters a war, the enemy studies their fleet, their technology, their weapons. They make models, they run probability maps, and then those models fail over and over again. Every admiral who has fought them has said the same thing. Their ships do not move like they should. Their weapons do not behave like they should. Their soldiers do not die like they should. This is the part that unsettles me the most, because the humans themselves, when asked, do not fully understand it either. I have spoken to their pilots, I have studied their testimonies. When asked how they achieved impossible maneuvers, their answers are always the same. We just did what we had to do. We refused to die. We made it work. This is not how physics works, and yet, for them, it does. The greatest civilizations have spent millennia charting the mechanics of existence. Humanity, in less than 1,000 years of space travel, has cracked, bent, or outright ignored half of them. As I sift through the archives, I begin to understand the growing fear in the Council's eyes. They are not afraid of human weapons. They are afraid of a species that makes the impossible routine. A species for whom the word limit is a challenge, not a wall. And yet, there is something deeper here. These events are not random. They cluster around moments of desperation, moments when humans are outnumbered, outgunned, cornered. It is in those moments, when defeat is certain, that reality itself seems to twist for them. It is almost as if the universe itself bends rather than watch them fall. I have no explanation, none of us do, but the evidence is clear. Humanity breaks the rules of physics, again and again, and the galaxy watches in silence. When the Council could no longer deny the pattern, they gave it a name: human causality violations. Not because they understood it, but because they had to call it something. A term to contain their fear. A box to pretend they had control. I was present when the first report was formally read aloud in the Hall of Continuum, a chamber older than most species themselves. Every race seated in that vast domed auditorium had spent their existence building a stable understanding of reality. And there, on a glowing platform, a trembling research speaker told them, in carefully measured words, that one species was tearing holes in the fabric they thought unbreakable. He displayed the footage from Reinar Gate. It remains, to this day, one of the most analyzed events in interstellar history. 150 human ships cornered by a joint blockade fleet. 6 Council races, synchronized and mathematically perfect in their firing vectors, surrounded them. The jump corridor was collapsing. Any escape attempt should have resulted in catastrophic disintegration. The probability models gave them 0% chance of survival. Not low, not 1 in a billion. 0. But that is the problem with humans. 0 does not mean 0 to them. The footage shows the blockade fleet opening fire. Concentric energy waves tearing through space. Human hulls lighting up like dying suns. Then suddenly silence. Space-time itself ripples. Ships appear where they should not exist, moving faster than predicted velocities. Council targeting algorithms lose lock. Sensor feeds fracture. Human vessels jump through the collapsed corridor. Through it. Something no drive, no engine, no theory allowed for. They emerge 0.7 light-years away. An impossible jump distance through a gravitational singularity. Not one ship lost. I will never forget the sound in that hall when the footage ended. Not shouting, not outrage. A deep, collective silence. Every scientist in that room had just watched the universe disobey its own rules. They launched investigation after investigation. Hyperspace physicists were dragged from their laboratories and forced to present new equations. Quantum tacticians ran simulation chains for decades' worth of CPU cycles. Nothing explained it. The closest model, one produced by the Solarian Probability Research Institute, didn't describe how humans did it. Only when. It showed that the probability of these events increased the more desperate the situation became. Human causality violations were most likely when they were about to be annihilated, when there was nothing left but defiance. To the Council, this was terrifying. To the humans, it was just another Tuesday. They don't even plan for it. I've read their tactical logs. I've spoken with their fleet commanders. When cornered, they don't surrender. They don't retreat. They act as if reality will bend for them. And disturbingly often, it does. One particular log haunts me still. The Orpheus incident. A human colony freighter, nothing but a civilian ship with weak shields and a skeleton crew, was ambushed by a Chiral raiding flotilla. They should have been vaporized in minutes. But then, something happened. Every Chiral sensor picked up the freighter entering a velocity curve that violated its own mass signature. It reached speeds that would have torn any conventional structure apart. Yet the ship held. When the Chiral attempted to match, their vessels ripped themselves to shreds. Survivor logs from the freighter are chilling. The captain's voice is shaking, not with fear, but disbelief. We just pushed. The ship shouldn't have made it, but she did. It should have been a singular case. But the pattern grew. The siege of Haskra, the vanishing of the Vigran ring, the White Comet assault. In every instance, the same fingerprint appeared. Desperate humans performing maneuvers, surviving forces, and enduring physical conditions that should have been impossible. Entire science divisions formed around studying them. The Department of Anomalous Human Mechanics. It sounds absurd, but to the Council, it became an existential priority. And then came the experiment. In 4082 Standard, the Council constructed Control Lab 9 on the edge of the Sithros expanse. They took a captured human ship, stripped, scanned, analyzed, and placed a crew of non-human pilots inside. They replicated the exact conditions of the Peregrine incident. Power levels, gravitational fields, fuel reserves, every variable identical. The result? Total destruction in 4.3 seconds. Then they put human pilots back in the ship. Gave them the same impossible scenario. The result? They escaped. Again. The Council's lead physicist at the time, Dr. Selvak Tesh, wrote a single line in his classified report. Either our understanding of reality is incomplete, or humanity's relationship with it is fundamentally different. I was among the first historians granted access to that report. I remember the feeling in my chest, that cold, creeping sense that I was reading the early pages of a galactic turning point. It was around this time that the whispers changed. No longer humans are reckless. No longer humans are unpredictable. Now the words spoken in dim chambers, away from official recorders, were darker. Humans are a glitch in reality. They bend the rules because they don't know how not to. They are the universe's exception. And perhaps the most unsettling of all, what if they're not breaking physics? What if they're just using the parts we can't see? This idea terrified the Council because it meant the rules weren't absolute. They were simply incomplete. And humans, in their stubborn, defiant, chaotic way, had been stepping through the cracks from the beginning. The Council issued containment protocols. No race was allowed to provoke a mass human engagement without authorization. Observation fleets were deployed under the guise of peacekeeping. But in truth, they were there to watch. But humanity noticed. Oh, they noticed. The humans do not take kindly to being studied. And they do not enjoy being treated as an anomaly. In what is now called the lunar blackout, human defense networks shut down 57 observation probes simultaneously, without detectable signatures. Council technicians still do not know how they did it. Then came the message, not transmitted through standard channels, not intercepted by conventional means. It simply appeared, in the core of the Council network, 5 words, burned into the data architecture like a scar. Stop trying to understand us. That was the moment everything changed. I remember sitting alone in the archive rotunda when the news came in. The endless star maps flickered above me, tiny lights marking the great civilizations. And I realized every one of them had built their existence on the assumption that the universe played by the rules. But humanity did not play. Humanity rewrote the game board. Even more disturbing, the effect was growing. Human fleets began performing coordinated jumps that bypassed established FTL pathways. Colonies reported environmental conditions that shouldn't sustain life, and yet they thrived. Human ships endured void storms without shield signatures. They moved like a breeze flowing around physical law itself. Our models broke down. Predictive warfare, something that had governed interstellar strategy for centuries, became useless. You cannot predict the moves of those who don't acknowledge the board. Alien strategists began describing humanity with words usually reserved for natural disasters. You don't fight humans, one Eltari general said. You survive them, another less public remark came from the head of the Trinari Fleet Intelligence. Every engagement with humans involves at least one statistically impossible event. 1. Entire doctrines shifted. Fleets were instructed to withdraw the moment humans began acting unpredictably. Entire colonies were evacuated preemptively. It wasn't their firepower. It wasn't their numbers. It was the unreliable fabric of reality that followed them. But the humans themselves, they walked through these cosmic anomalies like it was nothing. To them, surviving the impossible isn't strange. It's expected. I once interviewed an old human marine, a veteran of the Void War. His face was marked by radiation burns, his eyes clear and unnervingly calm. I asked him about the siege of Raven's Spine, a battle that still defies every known equation. He leaned back and said, "We should have died 100 times that day." The numbers didn't add up. But here's the thing, we don't care about the numbers. He smiled then, a small, dangerous smile. The universe bends. We don't. It was not arrogance. It was something worse. Conviction. This, I realized, is why every other species fears them. Not because they understand more, but because they refuse to accept less. They treat physical law not as a boundary, but as a dare. That defiance seeps into their culture, their history, their every story, from their earliest myths of flying before they could, to building cities on dying worlds, to sending explorers into storms that should have killed them. Their entire existence is a series of impossibles made real. The galaxy has built a fortress of logic. Humans walk through the walls. This is why containment has failed. This is why control is impossible. You cannot cage those who do not believe in cages. But even as fear spread, so too did something else. A kind of awe. Quiet, dangerous, infectious. Some among the council began to ask the forbidden question, what if humanity isn't the problem? What if they're the next step? There is a moment in every historian's life when recorded fact and myth collide. When what you've spent your entire career classifying as anomaly stares back at you with something far worse. Intention. For the galaxy, that moment arrived at the fracture point. It began, like many of humanity's greatest disruptions, with something deceptively small, a mining convoy on the edge of the Selen Rift. 33 freighters, 3 escort vessels, a simple resource run. No military significance, no political intrigue. And yet this would become the event that tore the Council's understanding of the universe wide open. The Selen Rift is infamous among navigators. A gravitational scar slicing through 8 systems, dense with distorted fields and magnetic turbulence. No vessel survives an uncontrolled fall into it. None. But that night, if night has any meaning in the void, the convoy transmitted a distress signal unlike anything recorded before. Then, silence. Every council system watching the rift expected one outcome: destruction. The freighters were as good as gone. That was the calculation. That was the law, except the convoy didn't die. 3 hours later, they emerged. Sensors caught a flash of displacement energy so intense it burned half the orbital monitoring satellites. The freighters appeared inside a stable corridor, one that should not have existed, moving at velocities no drive system could sustain. This wasn't a jump. It wasn't a slipstream. It was something entirely different. A tear in reality itself. What followed sent shockwaves through every scientific division in known space. The convoy's navigation logs should have been scrambled, corrupted, or annihilated. Instead, they were perfectly intact. And inside those logs, amid hours of static and panic, was a single, quiet voice, a human pilot whispering, "We didn't fall. We pulled." To this day, the phrase remains in my memory like a wound. Because in that simple sentence, every law the galaxy believed in began to unravel. The Council convened an emergency summit. Entire civilizations paused their wars and industries to witness what came next. For the first time, they admitted what many had whispered. Humans weren't breaking the rules of physics. They were revealing a side of it the rest of us could not see, and perhaps were never meant to. I was there in the upper balcony of the Hall of Continuum when the Council Science Directorate presented their analysis. They displayed wave maps of the rift's gravitational geometry. Perfectly stable one moment, shattered the next. A new corridor, like a hand reaching into the void and parting the storm, had formed. And the only explanation that fit was human intervention. But the humans denied it. Their ambassador leaned forward, hands folded with that disarming calm they've mastered, and said, "We didn't invent anything. We just kept going." That answer terrified everyone more than any weapon could. This wasn't technology they could steal. It wasn't a trick they could reverse engineer. It was them. Something about them. Something no one else could replicate. The Haskra Protocol was enacted the next day. The Council locked down human expansion routes, blockaded key corridors, restricted human FTL movements. Surveillance fleets surrounded the Sol network. In their fear, they tried to contain the glitch, to put humanity in a box. But remember what I said earlier. You cannot contain what does not believe in boundaries. The humans responded not with war, but with movement. One by one, their fleets began vanishing from their assigned routes. No sensor trails, no jump signatures, no hyperspace fluctuations. And then days or weeks later, they would appear where they were never supposed to be. It became a nightmare for military planners. Entire fortresses built on the edges of critical jump points suddenly found human ships appearing inside their defensive rings, not breaching them, bypassing them entirely. What followed was not war in the traditional sense. It was a demonstration. The humans never fired first, but they made it clear the Council could not stop them. And then came Event Horizon Zero. The Council deployed its largest fleet in history. 3,000 ships, 12 races, every strategic mind they could gather. to surround the humans on the edge of the Revel cluster. The idea was simple: overwhelm them before they could glitch their way out. It failed before it began. Council logs show the humans broadcasting a single message to the fleet moments before the engagement. Watch closely. What happened next is burned into my memory with surgical precision. The humans stopped moving. Every ship in their fleet simply went silent. No power spikes, no jump calculations, just stillness. Then, the space around them shifted. To this day, no instrument can fully describe it. It was as if the vacuum itself was breathing. Distances folded, positions inverted. Council ships locked in perfect attack formation suddenly found themselves facing empty space. Their targets no longer where physics said they should be. The human fleet reappeared behind them, and then they didn't fire. They didn't destroy. They simply left. 3,000 warships, not a single one able to do anything. The aftershocks of that humiliation echoed louder than any battle cry. For centuries, power had been defined by fleets, weapons, energy, and numbers. But humanity had revealed something deeper, a power over the very framework everyone else relied on. The Council didn't see warriors. They saw a civilization untethered. Scholars started using new language, not physics, metaphysics, reality drift, causality bleed. Terms meant to explain what could not be explained. Yet the humans themselves never offered theories. They didn't worship it. They didn't name it. They lived it. One particularly revealing account comes from Admiral Vethar, a Trinari fleet commander who survived Event Horizon Zero. In his private memoirs, never intended for public release, he wrote, "They do not move through space as we do. They move through possibility, and possibility obeys them." Some races began to call humans the thread cutters, others the causality nomads. The Solarians called them simply those who refuse. And that, I think, is at the core of all of this. When the universe says no, every species has learned to accept the answer, to bow to the immutable rules. But humans just shake their heads and try again. At first we saw this as recklessness, then as danger. But the truth is more complex. They aren't trying to break the universe. They're trying to survive it. Their history is written in blood, ash, and impossible victories. From their first steps on their homeworld, they have walked against storms, climbed mountains that should have killed them, crossed voids that should have swallowed them whole. The laws of reality are obstacles to them, not barriers. And so when they reached the stars themselves bent out of their way. I often return to a particular human proverb I found buried in their archives. The walls of the world are only as strong as the ones who believe in them. Perhaps this is why no other species has ever been able to replicate their actions. We study their ships, but it's not the metal. We mimic their algorithms, but it's not the code. We attempt their maneuvers and we die, because it's not what they do, it's what they are. In the decades following Event Horizon Zero, the Council slowly shifted from confrontation to uneasy coexistence. Publicly, the official stance is neutrality. Privately, everyone knows the truth. Humanity has become something untouchable, not because they rule the stars, but because they walk outside the lines that bind the rest of us. I've spent a lifetime documenting their defiance. At first I thought it was chaos. Later I believed it was brilliance. Now I suspect it is something much simpler. Instinct. They are the species that looks into the abyss, and instead of stepping back, they step forward. Perhaps that is why the universe bends. Not out of mercy, not out of logic, but because deep down, reality has always favored those too stubborn to accept its terms. In the archives, there is a final recording from one of the human commanders at the Selen Rift. It has been replayed in lecture halls, war rooms, and temples. When asked how they survived, she answered, "We didn't. The universe just realized it couldn't stop us." Her voice is steady. No pride, no fear. Just fact. That, more than anything else, is what terrifies the galaxy. It is not their weapons. It is not their technology. It is the quiet certainty that when the stars themselves say impossible, humans will find the crack in the sentence, and they will walk through. So I close this record not as a scientist, nor as a historian, but as a witness. If humanity is a glitch, it is the kind of glitch that rewrites the program. If they are a storm, it is the kind that does not pass. It reshapes the landscape it touches. Some civilizations fear the end of physics. I have come to realize it has already begun. Not with an explosion, not with a weapon, with a single species who simply refuses to obey.